Dr. Zero wasn't certain whether humans were entirely organic. That was the only logical conclusion his mind could grasp after witnessing what had just transpired. They're defective, one of his assistants murmured, his mandibles clicking anxiously. Or maybe they were engineered for warfare, Zarek Vu countered. He glanced down at the data pad clutched in his trembling digits. As a leading expert in xenophysiology within the hegemony, his research had unraveled the anatomy of countless sentient species. And yet, this defied all logic. He replayed the footage. The test chamber was a standard circular enclosure, padded walls, neutral lighting, designed for one sole purpose: measuring instinctive reactions. They had conducted this experiment with hundreds of species, gathering invaluable data on neurological responses to danger. The procedure was simple. A test subject would stand at the center while non-lethal projectiles were fired at random intervals. Most species flinched. Some froze. A few collapsed in terror. But the human? He caught it. Not just once. Every single time. No matter the angle, speed, or feint, he reacted instantly. The projectile wasn't merely deflected. It was plucked from the air mid-flight, as if he had anticipated its trajectory before it even arrived. Zarek Vu turned to his colleagues. Explain this. One of them, a researcher named Devar, hesitated before speaking. His neural response time is unnatural. We measured an average reaction speed that is 27% faster than any known sentient species. But that's not the most concerning part. Zarek Vu felt a chill creep through his carapace. Then what is? Tavar exhaled sharply. His reflexes aren't just fast, they're predictive. Zarek Vu narrowed his eyes. Clarify. Tavar pulled up another clip. The projectile was launched with a deliberate curve, meant to deceive. It was a test designed to induce hesitation, one that had successfully confused even species with exceptional peripheral vision and spatial awareness. The human did not hesitate. He moved before the projectile even started veering, as if he had foreseen its path before it was fully formed. That's not just speed, Tavar murmured. That's something else entirely. The subject, designated human, 42, stood calmly in the chamber, arms relaxed. He was awaiting another round, expression neutral, almost bored. Every other species had required a break by this stage, but he simply stood there as if nothing had happened. Zarek Vu watched in silence as the final test played out. This time, the projectile split into three, each aimed at a different point on his body. The human didn't retreat. He didn't panic. He caught one, swatted the second aside, and with minuscule tilt of his head, the third shot missed him by mere millimeters. The researchers stood frozen, fear evident in their rigid postures. No known species can react like this, one of them whispered. He wasn't processing the information and responding. He knew before it happened. The test chamber door slid open. The human strolled out, casual as ever. That all you got? He asked, stretching his arms. This was kind of fun. Zarek Vu's mandibles twitched. His voice lacked tension, no adrenaline surge, no distress. He might as well have been playing a game. Zarek Vu turned back to his colleagues. We need further analysis. This might be beyond anything we've anticipated. The human cracked his knuckles and smirked. You should see what I can do when I'm actually trying. The laboratory fell into hushed silence, broken only by the soft hum of machinery. Zarek Vu and his team sat before a wall of monitors, poring over the human's physiological data. The results were as baffling as his performance. Tavar scanned the readings. His adrenal levels are stable. No spikes during the test. No fight or flight response. Zarek Vu clicked his mandibles in contemplation. That shouldn't be possible. He should have shown at least minor signs of stress. Could there be a sense of malfunction? Tavar shook his head. We recalibrated twice. The readings are accurate. He hesitated. This human was completely calm. He wasn't reacting on instinct. He was in control the entire time. A junior researcher turned to them, wide-eyed. That means he wasn't just responding to threats. He was thinking through them in real time. A cold sensation crawled through Zarek Vu's exoskeleton. He had studied countless species, dissected their strengths and weaknesses, categorizing them by their evolutionary adaptations. But this wasn't normal. We need another test, he decided. Something more extreme. Tavar hesitated. What kind of test? Zarek Vu turned to the display, watching the human idly stretch his limbs in the waiting area. We studied their reflexes. Now we test their limits. Minutes later, human 42 was back in the chamber. This time, the environment had changed. The padded walls retracted, replaced with sleek metallic plating. Above him, automated turrets lined the ceiling, each one programmed to fire energy pulses at unpredictable intervals. Zarek Vu spoke through the intercom. This will be a live test, non-lethal, but significantly more difficult. The human nodded casually. Sounds good. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The first turret fired. The human twisted his torso. The pulse missed him by an inch. The second turret activated, aiming at his legs. He pivoted effortlessly, sidestepping the blast with unnerving precision. A third shot, a fourth. Each one dodged with flawless efficiency. His movements weren't just fast. They were perfect. Zarek Vu gripped the console, his disbelief mounting. This test was designed to push any species to its absolute limits. The human wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. More, Zarek Vu ordered. Increase the difficulty. The system obeyed. The turrets adjusted, firing in unpredictable sequences, overlapping shots to trap him. Yet, the human didn't falter. He ducked, twisted, rolled. His movements were fluid, effortless. The streaks of energy illuminated the chamber, yet not a single shot connected. This is impossible, Tavar whispered. The human chuckled. Come on, you can do better than that. The challenge was met. The system cranked to maximum intensity, turrets firing in synchronized bursts, the walls shifting to create additional obstacles. Any other species would have been overwhelmed. The human adapted. He didn't react. He anticipated. He moved as if he could see the shots before they were even fired. His footwork was a step ahead of the simulation itself. Zarek Vu felt something he had never experienced in all his years of research. Unease. Cease the test, he ordered. The turrets powered down, the hum of their energy cells fading into silence. The human straightened up, rolling his shoulders casually. That was fun. The research team was silent. The footage played on a loop across multiple screens, each angle capturing the same terrifying reality. The human had danced through a death zone as if it were a casual exercise. Tarn spoke first. Sir, this changes everything. Zarek Vu nodded grimly. We must report this to the hegemony immediately. If this is indicative of their species as a whole. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The hegemony had made a grave mistake. The hegemony council chamber was a place of cold logic, where decisions were made based on raw data and probability calculations. Zarek Vu stood before the assembly, his findings displayed in holographic projections above him. The faces of the council members, each representing a different species within the hegemony, remained motionless as they processed the footage. When the last frame froze on a human standing unscathed in the chamber, a ripple of unease passed through the room. This, began Counselor Vaughn, a high-ranking strategist from the Tal Dominion, is troubling. His reptilian eyes narrowed. Are you absolutely certain this is not a genetic anomaly? Zarek Vu stiffened. We have conducted multiple tests. All results indicate that the human in question is within the normal physiological range for his species. Counselor Rick, a representative of the Vosker technocracy, exhaled slowly. Then we have miscalculated. Severely. Explain, said Supreme Arbiter Heron, a veteran of countless campaigns. Zarek Vu gestured toward the data charts. Hegemony battle doctrine is built upon the assumption that superior numbers and technological advantage will ensure victory. Our models account for varying reaction speeds, stress responses, and adaptability. He pointed at the frozen image of the human. They break those models. Rick leaned forward. How so? They do not react to danger. They preempt it. Their reflexes, their ability to adapt in real time. This is not something we've seen before. Zarek Vu's mandibles twitched. They do not process threats in the same way other species do. Their bodies move before the conscious mind even acknowledges the risk. Silence hung over the chamber. Counselor Run's claws tapped against the stone table. A fluke? Not a fluke, Zarek Vu countered. It is an evolutionary necessity for their species. We dug into their historical records. Humanity did not evolve on a world where they were apex predators. They were prey for millions of years. Their survival depended on evading faster, stronger creatures. Their ancestors learned to recognize threats before they became threats. Arbiter Heron exhaled through his nose. And now, they apply that same survival instinct to everything, Zarek Vu said. Combat, strategy, situations where most species would freeze or hesitate. They act. He tightened his grip on his datapad. And the most dangerous part? They are aware of this advantage. Rick turned back to the frozen image of the human, standing relaxed, almost amused. What does this mean for the hegemony? It means that if conflict with humanity ever arises, Zarek Vu said grimly, we may not get a second chance to correct our mistakes. The chamber fell into deep contemplation. Finally, Arbiter Heron spoke. And their psychological disposition? Do they crave war? Zarek Vu hesitated. No. Their history shows an aversion to unnecessary conflict. But when war is forced upon them, he gestured back to the data. They do not fight to win. They fight to end it, quickly, decisively, and without hesitation. Counselor Run's tail flicked in irritation. Then the path forward is clear. Arbiter Heron nodded. Humanity must never become our enemy. As the meeting adjourned, Zarek Vu watched the humans' footage one last time. The subtle grin, the relaxed stance, the easy confidence. He had studied dozens of species in his lifetime, but for the first time, he did not feel like the observer. He felt like the one being studied. The decision of a Hegemony Council was final. Humanity was to be treated with caution, respect, and above all, neutrality. No provocations. No unnecessary conflicts. No challenges to their standing. Yet despite the declaration, ripples of unease spread across the galactic community. News of the human tests leaked. Rumors spread like wildfire. The footage, once a classified experiment, became the subject of hushed debates in war rooms, strategic councils, and military academies. For centuries, the hegemony had been the supreme force in the galaxy, wielding technology and numbers to maintain order. Now, for the first time, they were afraid. Zarek Vu remained at the center of it all. His reputation as a scientist had transformed overnight. No longer was he merely a xenophysiologist. He was now considered the foremost expert on humanity itself. Requests flooded in from admirals, strategists, planetary leaders. They all asked the same question. What else do they hide? Zarek Vu knew the answer. Nothing. Humanity was not concealing some secret superpower or advanced genetic manipulation. Their strength lay in what was already visible. Their ability to react, adapt, and overcome in ways no other species could. And yet, he could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Months passed. Relations between the hegemony and humanity remained stable. Diplomatic channels remained open. Trade agreements were signed. Mutual scientific exchanges were proposed. But underlying it all was a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement. Do not test them. Other civilizations took notice. Empires that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now paid close attention. Military doctrines were revised. Training simulations adjusted. But no matter how much they tried, no species could replicate what had been witnessed in that test chamber. The Tau Dominion attempted their own version of the experiment using their most elite soldiers. They analyzed every recorded movement, tried to match the reaction speeds, and even went so far as to simulate the environmental conditions of Earth to explain human evolution. They failed. Other species followed. Each determined to prove that humans were not unique, that their abilities were an outlier rather than a defining trait of their kind. They all failed. One by one, the galaxy came to a singular conclusion. The test had been no accident. Humans were different. Zarek Vu was summoned back to the Hegemony's research division for a new assignment. When he arrived, he found not a scientific team, but a military delegation waiting for him. Doctor, one of the officers greeted, your research has raised concerns. We have reason to believe humanity may not be as peaceful as they appear. Zarek Vu narrowed his eyes. They do not seek war. The officer nodded. Perhaps not, but we have studied their history. And when they wage war, they do not conquer. They resolve. And that, more than anything, made them unpredictable.